Hello everybody and welcome back to Screen Stars. I'm here again with my second top 10 list for the end of year review of the movies of 2017, and today it is my worst films of 2017. Now this is a list that will contain quite a lot of video on demand movies because unfortunately some of them I've watched have been pretty poor. However, there are some cinema releases in there as well. And I did say that I was going to do 3 top 10 lists, so I've already done my most disappointing movies of 2017, which is already up on the channel. There's this one, the worst movies of 2017, coming probably closer to Christmas will be my favourite movies of 2017, but I'm actually also considering a fourth one. I'm considering doing movies you may have missed in 2017, and in a sense I've been looking through and there's actually more movies than I thought in regards to I really enjoyed this year, but I can't fit them all in my top 10 list, so I might do like another list which is basically me saying these are great, these are actually good films, and you should probably check them out, but they just kind of didn't make my top 10 list, so I'm going to put them in like movies you may have missed in 2017 that you should be checking out. I haven't just decided on the title for that yet, but so I hope you enjoy this list of the top 10 worst movies of the year, and trust me, these movies need to be avoided because they ain't good. And coming in at number 10, it is Enter the Warrior's Gate, a drab, fairly dull fantasy adventure that stars Dave Bautista, who really needs to take care with some of these film choices, because if he isn't careful, very soon in a year or two he's going to start heading down the B-movie route. It's only things like Guardians of the Galaxy that I think is keeping him afloat, because he does make, I think, some poor film choices, this being one of them. There's not a lot about this. It's like a teen adventure movie, but it can't decide if it wants to be a family film or something a bit edgier and a bit riskier. The action's not good. The comedy's a bit uncomfortable. It's not particularly funny. It's just a mismatch of everything that doesn't really work, this movie. It's not shockingly bad, but fairly poor throughout, really, this movie. At number 9, Triple X, The Return of Xander Cage. What a shocking movie this was. I really didn't like this movie. I just thought it was... They had no idea what audiences want these days with this movie. I had no idea of what young people wanted to watch at the cinema. They thought all young people wanted to watch was people running about with tattoos, listening to terrible DJ music, one-liners, and Vin Diesel acting really pervy. It's just a really bad movie, this. Yeah, the action set pieces are good, the stunts are all good, the writing is amongst the worst I've seen all year. The screenplay is shocking, and it just has no idea how to make a good action movie. It was just like a remake of the original, and that wasn't particularly good in my opinion either. Definitely want to avoid this one. Didn't impress me. Number 8, Awakening the Zodiac. I like a good, mystery serial killer type movie, and I thought this had a lot of potential. The Zodiac serial killer is one of the most fascinating cases out there. Obviously, I love the Zodiac movie. I think, is it David Fincher? I think it is. Fantastic movie, and this plays on the fact that because he was never found and caught, that he is still out there, and this young married couple stumble across these murder tapes that was created by the Zodiac killer, and they try selling them, which essentially awakens the Zodiac. But it is just not fun, this movie, at all. It's not scary, and it's just full of characters making the stupidest decisions you've ever seen in your life, and it just drives you potty. The plot points in this movie definitely should be avoided. Number 7, Stasis. I kind of feel a bit bad putting this on the list, because this is a film that actually tries really hard to be something quite original and different, but just ends up ripping off a load of other science fiction movies. And if you watch my review, I do a whole list of science fiction movies that this basically rips off, and it doesn't do any of them justice. It doesn't have its own identity. It just copies of a lot of other things, and you can kind of forgive it if the effects are good and the acting's good, but they're not, because it is so low budget. They set it on Earth. It's like a time travelling science fiction movie. Set it on Earth in the past so that they don't obviously have to spend out on sets and all that special effects. Uninspiring, really, but it is a shame because I do think they tried to make a decent film. It just failed because they didn't have a good budget. Number 6, Once Upon a Time in Venice. Whoa. This movie is a crime. All the talent involved in it: Bruce Willis, John Goodman, Jason Momoa, Famke Janssen. Just masses of talent in this movie, and nobody gives a monkeys who's in it. They're all phoning in the performances. The only one that makes a decent attempt is Jason Momoa, but maybe he just doesn't realise how shoddy this movie is. Really poor film, no identity. Bruce Willis like a zombie throughout this movie, and it's just not fun to watch at all. Whatever it tries to be, whether it be action, comedy, it all fails in this movie, and it was one of the most uninspiring movies I've seen probably in a number of years, and it was an absolute crime when you consider the talent involved in it. Why anybody chose to do this, I don't know. Number 5, The Hatred. Again, I think there were some good ideas here with this movie, and it was essentially the very strong opening. I thought the first 15 minutes of this film, and then it just fell into cliched, low budget horror movie with particularly poor effects, really badly written, terrible exposition scenes, and an incredible letdown. And it was essentially a horror movie based on this artifact from the Second World War that, if exposed, unleashes this entity that feeds off hatred and all this kind of stuff. It was a decent idea, poorly executed, that will leave you scratching your head at times as to how poor it actually is. So definitely, I think, one to avoid here. Number 4, Zombies. Wow. This film is actually, if you turn your brain off completely, a bit of dumb fun. But it's hard to get away from the really poor acting here, the lack of any kind of decent story, the poor title, and one of the worst villains I've ever seen in a movie. It's just, there's nothing to it, this movie. There's no characters in it you care about, even though they try the hardest to make you care about them. Not interesting, not fun. There's that many zombie movies out there. You've got to try and do something different if you're going to make one, and this doesn't do anything different at all. This movie could have been made 20 years ago and it wouldn't have made a dent. Nobody would have watched it then. Uninspired on every level, really, this film. Number 3, The Bye Bye Man. Yikes. What can I say about this? Don't think it, don't say it is the motto in this movie. Don't think it, don't watch it, I would say. Really shockingly poor, this movie. For a cinema release as well, the acting really poor. The story would have worked well, and I said it in the review, would have worked far better as being like a 20-minute movie, an anthology piece. They just could not stretch a good idea over an hour and a half movie. It had fingerprints of the studio all over it. They wanted to, tone down the violence in it, and it just looked tame. Oh, really poor film, this. A good idea completely ruined by everybody involved. And it is a bit of a shock as to how bad this is when you watch it. So if you ever do, be prepared, because it ain't a good film. Number 2, Alien, Reign of Man. This was actually my lowest scoring review of the year. I think I gave it 2 out of 10. But it's at number 2 for a reason. We'll talk about that later. This film It starts off by saying a vision by, and then it gives you the director's name, and straight away I knew when I saw that I was in trouble with this movie. Someone who clearly thought a lot about himself made this movie, and it's poor. No story. The acting is probably the worst I've seen this year in a movie. Bizarre film in a sense of nothing happens at all. It's just one scene after another that you hope is going to start tying together and give you some kind of story that never happens. Really very difficult to watch this movie. It is shockingly bad. And at number 1, Killing Hasselhoff. I gave this 2.5 out of 10, but on retrospect I probably should have given it 1 out of 10. Really, really bad movie. You must avoid it. It's almost comical as to how bad this movie is. It really distressed me when I watched it. Not funny at all. There's nothing slightly amusing about it. It's been edited terribly. The actors all involved, they must have been scratching their heads how they got in this situation making this movie. The only one that comes out with any credit is David Hasselhoff, and that's only because he's playing on his own caricature, this Hoff character. Not funny, offensive at times, incredibly dull, uninspired comedy, and one that I will gladly say I will never ever watch again, and I suggest you don't ever watch it either. So there you go. That's my top 10 worst movies of 2017. A mixture of video on demand movies and cinema releases, and some are worse than others clearly, but all of them should pretty much be avoided, I think. So I hope you enjoyed the list. I'd love to hear your comments on what your worst films of the year are, and if you've seen any of the movies on my list, what you thought of them. And please stay tuned to the channel for more top 10s, and if you've never visited before, please subscribe. Please consider subscribing to the channel. Thanks for watching.